this is Dave Douglas, and welcome to A Noise from the Deep, the Greenleaf Music Podcast. We'll be listening to the music of Arun Ramamurthy. That was his trio playing Walk as One. We'll be listening to several of his tracks, including from an earlier album with his wife Trina Basu, violin duos. This is great music. He's got a new album on Greenleaf Music called New Moon. You can hear his album and all the music that we put out at Greenleaf Music by joining us as a subscriber. You can also email me, podcast@greenleafmusic.com. But for now, please enjoy this conversation with Arun Ramamurthy. Arun, how are you? So great to see you.
Doing good, Dave. So happy to be here.
Thanks for joining me. It's such a great record that you made, New Moon, with your trio with Damon Banks and Samir Gupta. The music is so great. I feel like for people who haven't heard it, I'd rather just play the music. But the idea of this is that we have a conversation, and I realized as I was listening again, we haven't spoken that much about this music together. We've communicated a lot,
right?
But to sit down and talk about the record is different. So we were listening to Walk as One, bit of it as an intro. It's such a great piece, and it feels to me like knowing that the suite is the next 4 tracks that we're going to listen to, and it's called New Moon Suite, that you must have written Walk as One kind of as an introduction to the suite, or it functions really well as a hello, here we are.
I think it worked out that way, that it functioned really well as an opener. It was a song that I wrote well before the suite, actually. So I kind of had it in my back pocket, and I hadn't recorded it yet. So I wrote it in 2020. And it was actually right here, it was right during the pandemic when everything was shut down. And the first time people started coming out was after George Floyd was killed. And there was, this uprising and this consciousness around Black Lives Matters movement, and Brooklyn came together. Everybody marched in the streets.
Yeah.
Me and kids and my wife, we all were out in the streets as well. There was a real spirit of togetherness that I felt when we were out there. And so I felt inclined to write something that was kind of going to capture my feelings toward it. And, at that time, I was actually also playing with a lot of maqam musicians, Arabic maqam musicians. And maybe some of you probably know well, Amir El-Safar.
Wow.
And we were collaborating, and that sound was in my ears. So I was kind of inspired a little bit by Arabic maqam, and I chose a raga called Chakravakam in South Indian Carnatic music. And it's similar to a maqam that I've heard. It's similar to like this Hijaz scale. But it has the natural 6 instead of the flat 6. And I thought, maybe this would be the perfect one because it's kind of reminiscent of sound that I was going for, but it very much had a fundamental Carnatic flavor to it. But then it also, for me, I wanted to speak to the togetherness that I was feeling as a society. All that wrapped into this piece. And, so like, Samir with the snare drums, like I wanted to have this feeling of a march. I wanted to have this feeling of like, okay, we're going to stand up and we're going to fight the power, that vibe. That's where inspiration comes.
Wow. Yeah, we need it now more than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now.
I made a record called Marching Music. It was in 2019. And we thought that we would be touring it and performing it at rallies. And, and it came out in March or April of 2020. So there wasn't really any touring. But same instinct. I went to a rally yesterday, and it's good to have some music with you.
Yeah, it's the lifeline, I think, for all of us. This thing is something that can bind us all together.
Wow.
Without question.
That's great. So now your studies I know that you were in India and studying, but was that your earliest experience?
I mean, I grew up in New Jersey, right around New York City. My father and mother immigrated to the country in 1970, and they settled in Queens, for about 8-9 years right before I was born, and then they moved to Jersey, which is where I was born. So I actually started my Carnatic music training right in New Jersey.
Wow. Yeah.
Which is, wild. I started playing Western classical music first. I learned from 8 years old. I was playing Western classical music. But as you know, like Carnatic music, you may know that it's it's an oral tradition, and everything that you play, you sing.
Yeah.
So everybody learns to sing, and we all learn to sing first. It's like the direct connection to your soul is you learn to sing, and then you can then transmit it through your instruments. So throughout my life, I've been singing, and I started with singing with my mother. So I started singing when I was 6, and then started playing Western classical when I was 8, and then started Carnatic music when I was 10.
Wow.
It was a really good Carnatic violin teacher in New Jersey.
Big community, I'd imagine, too, like a diaspora.
Yeah. And it was very interesting because he was a really fantastic artist who had a day job as well, which I found mind-boggling. But playing at like the highest levels, and he didn't have many students. He only had a handful, less than 5, I would say, throughout his life teaching. And I was one of them. So I was very fortunate to learn with him. And then so that was all right in Jersey. But in my later teens, I met through my parents, who became very close with 2 brothers, Mysore Nagaraj and Mysore Manjunath. And they are, some of the finest violinists on the planet today.
Wow.
Music. They're leading in the scene right now. So I studied with them. They would tour in the U.S. My parents actually organized concert tours. So they would come, stay in my house, tour around the country. My house was like headquarters. And then sometimes I would just go on the road with them a little bit.
Wow.
I was like 15 years old, 18 years old. And I'd bring my instrument, and I'd practice with them in the homes that we were staying in, and then carry their instruments to the stage, kind of thing.
Wow.
But I got a lot of training that way. And then in my, when I turned 18 or 19 or 20, I started going to India just to spend time with them. And I'd spend like kind of months at a time. In 2003, I spent a year in India, and I lived in their house. They lived in the same house with their father, who Mahadevappa was his name. And he was a great violinist in his own right. So they all lived under one roof.
What part of India is this?
It is in Mysore.
Okay.
Mysuru is right outside Bangalore in the state of Karnataka.
Yeah.
It has a lot of history. Mysuru was the capital of like South India, essentially, years ago. So there's a beautiful Mysore palace there. There's a lot of rich history and music and culture there. And my gurus have really established themselves right there. They put Mysuru on the map for Carnatic music in this current era.
Wow.
And so I spent a lot of time. So a lot of my training, I'd say, was between the States here and in India. And then, that's all the traditional training. And then I learned a lot on the stage too, with random musicians from around.
Wow. There's a lot to come back to there, but I'm just curious if working with Damon and Samir, if you felt like you had to transmit to them some of the lessons of Carnatic music, or if they had their own independent experience learning that.
Yeah, there's a little bit of both of that. Absolutely, I did transmit a lot of the ideas, musical ideas, kind of concepts, spiritual ideas about what we're thinking about, what we're trying to go to, what the music's supposed to mean, what it means for me. And to me, that is one of the most important things, is when a band can be on the same page about the intention of the music, especially improvised music, right?
Amen.
Because the point is, when we can be on the same page with the intention, I'm okay with wherever it goes, because I trust them. They're my brothers. And if they're feeling one way someday and they want to go over here because that's just where their head's at, that's okay. As long as we know, that what the intention of what this was to be, and especially the New Moon Suite, which I know we'll talk about, but there's kind of a specific intention with that suite, and I think we all dial into that.
Yeah.
And, Samir is a tabla player as well, which is North Indian classical percussion. So he does know a lot of the bowls meaning the rhythmic syllables and concepts, and he's very familiar with all of that. He also did play with some Carnatic musicians in the Bay Area where he grew up. So he has an idea of some of these concepts, and I drill it in though. All right. So we kind of go deep with some of that rhythmically, and it's an evolution,
Well, it's also like something that you said really effectively in your liner notes, and this, I think, also dealt somewhat with your grandmother, that the idea of having one me, that you had all of these different musics in you, and it was when you realized this is all part of just this one person here. And it sounds to me like the way that you share with Damon and Shamir is also a part of that. They have multiple musical identities and experiences and educations that they are able to bring to the table.
Oh yeah. And that's why, like, the whole idea of like oneness to me is a lot about, the first thing I think about is about listening. It's about hearing somebody else and trying to understand where they're coming from. So when I put out what I'm putting out, it involves them, right? So then, like, my sound and my output has so much to do with what they're doing, that everything sort of just kind of comes together like that. And we talked about that too as a band.
Yeah.
Especially in the beginning, we talked about some of these things. So yeah, I think, their influence on this project, and, like, me and Samir have been playing for 16 years together. And it's sometimes I'm like, we're finishing each other's sentences. Like we do things sometimes spontaneously together in time, as if we were, as if it was composed.
Yeah.
And I feel like, just from years and years of playing and talking, and not that, it's just very interesting. And I'm definitely very moved by their sounds, and the music has evolved because of that.
Absolutely. Let's hear the first movement of the suite and then maybe talk about it, which is the body of the record. It's called Bangalore to Brooklyn. All I can say is well done. Oof. So much going on there. It's fantastic. I could start anywhere with the questions, but maybe the first thing, the biggest thing, and you talked about listening and sound, and I love that. You know, it's so significant. The sound of the recording is a really special part of what it is, and it makes me wonder. You know, it's unique, the relationship of the bass sound to the drums and percussion, the relationship to your instrument. And it makes me think, okay, you must have all been in separate rooms, separate spaces, in order to get the sounds so pure and clear. But at the same time, the rhythmic interaction is so deep and profound and instantaneous that makes me wonder how you captured it.
I was isolated. Definitely, I needed to be isolated. But Damon's playing an electric, so you know, basically, we all had cans. We had headphones on, and Damon and Samir were in the live room together, and then I was in ISO, and you know, but we were all like, honestly, the proximity it's we were at Figure Eight Studios in Brooklyn, and it's literally a 2-minute walk from my house.
Great.
It's not a huge room, right? So even though I'm behind glass, we're literally, you know, just 5 feet apart from each other, listen through headphones. So, you know, the experience of honestly playing in a studio, as you know, is not the same as just, you know, like really hearing somebody through space, as opposed to through your headphones. But, you know, we did our best to kind of dial it in, zone in with each other, be together. It was a crazy time, to be perfectly honest. We were scheduled to be in the studio a few months before that. And the day before, or 2 days before studio session, Samir's father passed away, got sick, and was in India at the time when it happened. So Samir left, you know, and he was gone in India for a couple of weeks. And his father passed, and then he came back. And of course, you know, we gave as much time as he needed. But I think playing music was part of what he also maybe needed and wanted to kind of turn the corner. So we found the date in January, and we did the session. And you know, I had a fever during the session. Like I was sick that whole week, and we made it work though. And the studio experience was something that was very coming together. And not to go on it, but you know, the meaning of the New Moon Suite is really about ancestors. It's about the inspiration of family, right, and the importance they play, the important role that they play in our lives. So, with what happened for Samir and his family, and actually Damon had also recently gone through something with his mother. It was really relevant for all of us. It was something that actually meant something deep to each one of us. And I think that came out in the music. And I think it still does. And I think it still acts as some sort of therapy for the three of us, you know, kind of play it can be a journey. And we all go into different places, you know, with our minds. So that day was definitely one of those.
I think you play that music and you feel closer to the person, even though they're not on this physical plane. Everything that they gave to you and meant to you, and even things you didn't understand when they were here.
Yeah.
I find that in playing the music, certain things you make realizations just from listening and feeling and the intention, as you said.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like music has this way, right? It's different than other art forms, and it's a lot like food and smell. Like, right, there's this very instinctive, very like raw, like it'll immediately take you somewhere. And I feel the same way when I hear a song that like jogs my memory from my childhood. It will bring me back to that moment immediately, and I love I love that.
Does that translate into your compositional process? I mean, like when you're writing this suite, obviously it's already there. It's for your grandmother and your family and all of these relationships. But I know that composition is different than improvisation and performance. And I wonder, did you bring that into the composing room?
Yes, to some extent. Composition for me is, it's a lot harder than improvising.
Uh-oh.
And it's way easier to just improvise and, I do it and I put it away. And then I go to sleep and I wake up and I do it again. And I love that. Composition is funny because you gotta, you gotta write it in stone. I'm like, well, that can be
you're really, really preaching to the choir here. This is...
Yeah, I know. I mean, well, I've heard all your stuff, and honestly, I get it, because if you can improvise and you can, see the sky every single day, or, see the, whatever, like, the sky opens up when you improvise, it feels so good.
Well, I often tell students that the reason that they encounter writer's block is that it's different than improvising in that you're putting it down on a piece of paper and saying, I wouldn't mind hearing this again. I stand by this.
Right. which maybe that doesn't always happen. You're just like,
well, but it's a commitment.
Yes.
And I tell them, look, even just because you wrote it down, you could still throw it away. So just don't be so delicate.
Exactly. And I threw away a lot of things. Like, what's funny about Bangalore to Brooklyn is I wrote that, and then, I did throw away a lot of ideas. And then it was like a while later, and I went back to the first idea I had. And that's what you hear now. That's what it was. I went back to my first idea. My first, like, raw idea is the one that I ended up using. Even after, like, so basically, I started more with a rhythmic concept. The Bangalore Brooklyn is kind of in a 3-beat or 6-beat cycle. And we call it Rupaka Tala. Mm-hmm. So the Tala is like time cycles. Mm-hmm. And so this is in a 6-beat time cycle. And I wanted, and so the whole melody, so there's like, it's a very Carnatic way of kind of like having a melody run, but then having these little things. Then the next one, the suffix or the ending, and then I forget, the next one adds a little bit more to it. So it kind of just like you keep growing it. Like the first ending was this big, the second ending was this big, third ending was this big. And they start in different spots. And, the idea in Carnatic music is that, like, we're improvising, and the violinist or the vocalist, whoever's leading, is improvising, and then might, at their own whim, whenever they feel like it, drop some rhythmic pattern that they know where it starts and they just do it. The percussionist has no idea when they're going to do it, but they have their ears open. So then they're playing and they're grooving, and then they hear this thing, and then boom, oh, I recognize that, I'm going to hit it. So they don't start together. It's not like, okay, guys, here's the cue, let's do it.
Right.
You hear it, and that's the cue, and you come in later. So it's kind of like you layer in, and that's the aesthetic of the music, and I'm all about that. And I kind of want to bring a lot of that energy to this sort of jazz trio, which is a Carnatic jazz trio. That's the thing, is like the spirit, the on your toes, the spontaneity of jazz and Carnatic music is what I find to be the most common ground. It's just that, like, you have to just be aware. You have to be open, on your toes, ready to go, ready to listen, ready to move. And I think Carnatic music is filled with that. That's what we do. So a lot of times, like when we're improvising, that's the whole idea. Is like, yes, we're trying to go there. And in the composition process, I do try to, often in the past, I've tried to like write stuff out or work stuff out and then play it with the guys. And then we mess around with it and we see what happens. in this case, it was actually a lot of pandemic stuff. So I just kind of wrote it right here in this room that I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
And, I kind of needed to have a finished product, kind of when I went to them. And everything seemed to work out.
Yeah. It's a language of a band, though. It's that you were able to write something down that could speak to them in that procedure that you just described, which not everyone is familiar with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was something that, I'm thinking about the bass player. I'm thinking about what would he do? And because there's no bass in Carnatic music, right? So like, there's no precedent for what a bass player might do in this setting. So we have to start from scratch a lot.
Yeah.
And, so he doesn't play all the rhythmic passages verbatim the way I am. I'm finding places where he can hit that are going to accentuate it, but that also don't make him play these crazy licks all the time, which also can be a little crazy to kind of go back and forth from his groove into this like super complex passage. But what's amazing about Damon Banks is that he's still going to learn it because that's Damon, and he does. Yeah. And then, honestly, right now on live shows, he's shedding this stuff like no other. And it's like, crazy.
I mean, in a sense, he's in the trio because that's the way he learns things, and you're going to get him and his voice with a deep understanding of what you wrote and what you're going to play and what Samir is going to do. And that's a great band. I really love it. I want to ask about your grandmother, but I thought maybe I would play this excerpt of the second part of the New Moon Suite. And this, I believe, is the specifically dedicated? Yes.
So this passage is called Aji, and Aji means grandmother. So we called her Aji. And the whole suite is really dedicated to her, and this is the very specific song.
Arun, that's just fantastic. Great piece.
It's a very personal one.
Can you talk about it?
Yeah. So, well, my grandmother is my mom's mom, and she's the only grandparent that I knew. So I get it. You know, my grandfather's or my father's mother, they passed away before I was born. But she, you know, my mother was a singer, a Carnatic vocalist. Is a Carnatic, not performing much anymore. So my grandmother also, you know, loved Carnatic music. She lived in a very, very small village in India, you know, kind of like a very, very small place. So we used to go there as kids and spend, you know, summers there and stuff like that. And then she would come and spend time with us in the U.S. So I've always grew up with her around, and she was the biggest advocate of me playing Carnatic violin. She played violin as well, and she didn't play professionally, but always had one, played it, practiced it. In that village that she's from, Parvati from, she also would teach Carnatic music to kids, you know, not charging anybody, not anything like that, just for the love of music. And kids would come to the house and she'd teach music. So, you know, throughout my life, she was there as this figure. And for me, born in America, you know, we're constantly in this middle ground of not being sure, are we Indian, are we American? In America, we're viewed as Indian. In India, we're viewed as American.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because here, like, you know, if you're brown skin, Indian, I grew up in a very kind of white town. And so, you know, there was not that many Indians in my community when I was growing up. So, you know, I didn't, like, for example, like many of my friends in middle school didn't even know I played violin because I didn't tell them. Because it was one of those things you might, you know, it didn't always make sense to talk about.
And there was no violin in the middle school band, or?
No, there wasn't. I played clarinet, to be honest, in middle school. I loved clarinet, but I never played violin in school, in high school either. So she was, you know, somebody that sort of connected me to my roots. You know, she was the person that really was my roots. And so her love for violin and for me playing it was pretty special. Mm-hmm. And as I got older and I got into my 20s and I was performing a lot, I was improvising, I was doing, you know, I was taking big steps in my life as a musician. And I was really growing. She loved it. And, you know, in my 20s, when I spent my year in India with my gurus, you know, I'd gotten to a very good place. And I think she was very proud of me. And I spent a lot of time with her on that trip. That I would I would be in Mysore with my gurus, but then I would leave to go spend time with her. And she at that time was in Hyderabad. So I went there, and it was one of the last times I spent with her. But she always used to tell me, like, you have great gurus. You have all your 3 teachers are wonderful. They have very distinct styles. But you should have your own style. You should have something that is you, because nobody else can be you. Only you can be.
Wow.
So you should, while you have great teachers and you should follow them and listen to their advice and do as they say. You should also always be trying to find out what your voice is. And she would say things like that to me. And I just found that to be amazing and inspiring. And there's one raga in particular called Kalyani. Kalyani is like the Lydian scale.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a raga I used to play a lot. And I think at that time, when I was there on that trip in 2003, I was playing it a lot for whatever reason. And I was playing Kalyani, and she would be like, okay, now can you play it in a different way? Do something else with it. Don't do it the conventional. And she was like sleeping in the room. Anytime she would sleep or rest, she would be like, tell me to come and bring my violin and just play.
Wow.
And then she would like rest while I was practicing. So then she kind of like,
how old was she at that time?
Oh, maybe almost 90.
Wow. Okay.
Like late 80s. And she would lay down and she'd ask me to come play, and the room would be kind of dark, and I'd play. And then she said to me like, oh yeah, play different now, do something else. And at first I was like, I don't know what to do. And I had this kind of awkward silence of like, what am I supposed to do?
Well, it's not really a part of the tradition, is it? You're supposed to learn phrases and ragas and identity music. So she was challenging you to make up your own thing.
Challenging me and challenging the system.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that. But I would also say that, like, while that's true, that, okay, yes, you're supposed to, the conventional methods are that you play what's taught. They spoon you, like you play what is known to be Kalyani. The phrases that you've learned, you kind of put them all together and you create this beautiful alap.
And it has a certain shape and certain rules, certain ways that you use the notes that you wouldn't use them another way because it would just be stupid. And there's no other explanation than that, really.
It just might not be what Kalyani, the raga Kalyani, needed, even though there's like a sharp 4. Right. Other ragas have a sharp 4, but the way you treat the sharp 4 in Kalyani might be different than the way you treat it in another raga that also has a sharp 4. But I mean, there are musicians now, and I will say just as a side note that there is a movement, and there have always been musicians that have pushed the boundaries of what was allowed. Even 50 years ago, there were musicians pushing boundaries. Yeah. Right. So it's not to say that everyone stays in a box, but I would say that for the most part, yes, we're taught to kind of do the traditional methods of.
I would also add that even when you hear the masters play, I mean, this is where the rules come from, and yet you still hear their personalities.
Yes.
Hot temper, mellow, angry, loving, all these qualities that are very personal.
Yes. Even though the phrases might be the same, which is it's very interesting, like that's the actual technical phrase that you're playing versus the person behind it and their feeling, how much that adds to, and you can see it, you could feel it, you could taste it. Mm-hmm. It's all there. And, so she was all about me experimenting. And I remember, I tried and I did I don't know what I did. I did something and she was happy. And then I was like, okay, cool. But she would talk about that kind of thing. So this song, Aji, that's on the record, it is in Kalyani. It's in that raga. But the difference is that instead of, like, I'm usually tuned D-A-D-A. So my tonic is D. That's my stop, my do. And it's a movable do, basically, right? Whatever tonic you want to pick, you can. And traditionally, D is a good pitch for violin. So D Lydian, D Kalyani was the raga. But instead of having D as my root, I play D Lydian, B Kalyani, but I have Damon in B. So Damon, the whole thing is kind of so then it becomes kind of like a B Dorian thing, and it becomes more of a minor vibe. But a lot of the phrases that I'm playing, my hands are thinking about a D Kalyani. So like I'm moving and I'm kind of thinking about things through the lens of Kalyani, but my ears are hearing this B Dorian thing, B minor thing. So for me, it's just kind of thinking about what she said about like, okay, now play Kalyani, but make it different. So that to me was a way of making it different. And that's where I started, was like, okay, when I sat down for the song, I was like, what do I want to do? I want to honor her. How do I do that? Well, let me think about something she said to me.
Wow.
And apply it. So I literally
adding layers to it, adding layers of profundity, different meanings, overlay.
Yeah. And then the melody kind of came, you know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how it all happened after that, but it was more of like me just playing around, putting a drone on in B being in tuned in D, and playing through this raga and just kind of feeling it out and seeing where I'm at. And then the melody sort of kind of came. But a lot of it is about, you know, a lot of my composition comes from me sitting in silence and trying to let things come into me. Sometimes I find that that's actually when the good stuff happens. When I'm like forcing myself to write something, I usually write stuff that I'm not happy with. When I just slow down and stop and just kind of really and try to empty my mind, I think or meditate on the ideas that I'm trying to write about, then actually the ideas come a lot here.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely. I'm reading a book by a wonderful author named Pico Iyer. Have you ever heard of him? Anyway, he's written a lot of great books and he's traveled around the world, but he's writing a book about being in this monastery where he's secluded and he's in his cell, and he talks exactly about this experience of emptying out, of having silence, of not having goals, and of being in this space where everyone else there is going through this same experience. And it's like, sometimes it's quite funny because he goes out and he starts talking to someone very animatedly and they all just smile and nod and don't say anything. Reminded me of it. It's a good book. It's called A Flame. You might like it.
Yeah.
So Mirrors, should I just maybe play just a little bit of this?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, it's just fantastic, but at some point people have to go get the record and hear the whole thing. I don't want to give the whole thing away, but that's a fantastic track. I love what ensues after that on the track, and I recommend that everybody go and and take a listen. But I something I've always been curious about, and I feel like maybe you could describe it, is I don't know, maybe there is no description, but the question revolves around, how does a raga develop? Like, it's not just the scale tones, although it is also the scale tones, and it's also the composition that it's emerging from. But then there's a way to play a raga that doesn't betray the quality of the sound. That I know it's very deep. I mean, I'm not asking you a simple question here, but how do you think about it? The development of, especially within improvisation, like, bebop players play with a certain set of understood language, and raga works very differently. How would you break that down?
It all depends on the context. It depends on, what form of improvisation we're talking about. In alap, for example, so alap is a free form, like no pulse and it happens before the composition, the actual set composition. So in a traditional setting, it would just be the drone, tanpura, right? Tanpura is the shruti, the drone, the four strings that are plucked, right? Open strings that are plucked.
The steady pitch that doesn't change, that's under everything, yeah.
Right, it's the root, it's the octave below, and then it's the fifth, almost all the time. You can change that fourth string, it doesn't have to be the fifth. The raga itself doesn't have a fifth. You can tune it to the fourth, you can tune it to the sharp seven, you can tune it to a note in the raga. More often than not, it's on the fifth, because there is a fifth in it. That's the most open tanpura tuning. So that's the canvas for which you can paint on top and create the art on top. So the alap then happens on top of that. I mean, if you have, obviously we know about the ornaments. If we have Lydian, right? My tonic is right here. I'm picking a random note. Sa re ga ma pa da ni sa sa ni da pa ma ga. So the ornaments, sa re. The second interval, sa re. Re, I'm saying re for the second interval, but I ornamented sa re. Sa re ga, ga's the third. So now I'm doing sa re ga. Right, so you can see how much I can do with just those three notes. So we have ways. So then that's all the language. Sa re ga ma pa da ni sa sa re da pa ma na. So now I just went up and down the scale. That's all I did, right?
But using the ornaments that you learned when you learned the raga.
Yes.
Right.
And I learned those ornaments, and I learned how they all, what their intention and what their purposes are, and what they like. I learned to speak the language of this raga through compositions. So I learned many compositions in this raga, where composers have established what the raga is. And then you learn these compositions so you get it on your hands or you get it in your voice.
Yeah.
And then you have an understanding of what this raga is supposed to be. Then you can turn to improvisation, right? But it's kind of like that's sort of the pathway to get there. It's like through the compositions, you actually really learn what it is, what it's supposed to be. And then you get it on your hands, you get it in your body, you get it in your system. And then you can start to speak the language. And, to speak it fluently takes time.
Yeah.
That's why I keep talking about language, because it is exactly like that. If I was to learn French, I would learn bits and bits. I would learn words, what they mean. And then I might learn sentences, literally to say sentences. So, verbatim, somebody spoon feeds me a sentence and says, you say this. You learn about how to go to the bathroom. You learn about how do I ask for water, right? Those kind of things. And then you can start to internalize, oh, now I know what this means. I can put this with this,
Yeah.
and it'll be a brand new sentence. So it's all very much like that. And the way you unfold it, again, in Alap, there's again, a conventional trajectory,
Yeah.
An arc, if you will, of kind of saying in, kind of the roots octave, let's say the center middle octave, and then you might, I think a lot about centers of gravity when I think about Alap, that every raga has different notes that are centers of gravity, right? So for Kalyani, the Lydian scale, like Sa, the root, Ga, the major third, the fifth, Pa,
Yeah.
and Ni, the seventh. Those are all centers of gravity. Those are all notes that you would probably improvise around. And, if I'm on the third and I'm thinking of that as my center of gravity, I could go above and below it. I can dance up here and I can dance down here, but everything is sort of drawn towards Ga when I'm on Ga, right? And then I slowly move up and I go to Pa, and then Pa becomes my center of gravity, and then I improvise around that.
Yeah.
And then I go up to Ni. And so in a way, it's like you kind of climb the ladder up, and then you kind of come down the ladder, and then you close. And then that shows the full picture of this raga. And throughout, of course, if you drill back in and zoom in, there's so many other things we could talk about. But this is more of a large picture.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. That's great. Yeah. Believe me, I'm not sitting here thinking, okay, now I understand the whole thing. But that's a great explanation. Thank you.
And, I also want to say every style of music has its histories and its language, right? Like, for me, like, I don't consider myself like a real jazz musician. I can't, if you threw me in with some heavy hitters, like, yeah, it'd be hard for me to play over heavy, like, quick changes. That would be tough, for me, because it's not my roots. It's not where I came from. So it's like, to me, when I see cats doing that, I'm like, wow. And what is going on there? And like, how are they thinking to connect this to this? All the leading tones and all those things. So it's like, you're not just changing on the dime, you're thinking about it before and after.
Right.
So it's like, so all of that is.
But there's also, like you said, voice leading and resolution, but there's also something akin to what you described where you're understanding what the important notes within each chord are and how they work in relation to the other chords and the other notes. And so that's an analog to what you're describing a little bit.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because, like, I guess the spirit of what we're saying is very much the same. It's about, like, understanding those nuance. It's just the specifics of how you get there are a little bit different. Yeah. But essentially, like, the goals are the same. Thought process is the same. Improvisation is improvisation. It's not a coincidence that, like, when I came here to New York, when I moved to Brooklyn like 2007, and like I was like hungry to meet people and play. Because I had been playing like traditional Carnatic music kind of the whole time, but I was like opening up a lot. I was like ready to play. And it's not a coincidence that the people that I found that were hungry to play with me were all jazz musicians.
Huh.
Right? It wasn't Western classical musicians, it wasn't, folk musicians. It was jazz musicians.
Wow.
Because it's the same kind of idea of like, yeah, oh, you improvise, we improvise. Like, just curiosity about how do we find each other? Like, what do you do?
And maybe also a certain understanding of the instrument that can be fairly spontaneous and organic and tied to who you are. Something.
Yes. Well, again, the kindred spirits, that's what I love is jazz and Indian classical music to me are kindred spirits. They are brethren. They think about music the same way. When my relationships with friends that are jazz musicians is is close, and we feel, and the way they speak about musicians and elders, exactly the way like I speak about them and I do with my friends that are in the Carnatic music or who study music scenes. It's so similar. It just has always felt very connected.
Let me play just a short excerpt of the last movement of the New Moon Suite. I don't want to do it injustice to the title. How do you say it?
Oh, Amavasya. Amavasya.
Sorry to have to fade it. We're running on in time, and I don't want to take advantage.
That's the thing is, getting classical stuff, you might need to set aside an hour.
And that's a beautiful track, and it's about 15, 16 minutes. And so, yeah we're not going to play the whole thing here, but hopefully people will take the record and just listen to the whole thing. Aside from just the music and the trio, and I know you guys have concerts coming up and more touring, and but you've also organized this thing called Brooklyn Raga Massive.
Yeah.
And you've been doing that for a while. What is that exactly?
Yeah. So Brooklyn Raga Massive is a collective. It's a presenting organization. We're a nonprofit. Started in 2012. And kind of I've always had this instinct to try to present our music, Indian classical music, to kind of audiences here, but it's always been in temples and sort of high school auditoriums that are rented out by Indian organizations. That's where I grew up seeing the music.
Huh.
But it's not where, as an adult, I started going to, right? I was going to jazz clubs, I was going to restaurants, I was going to, American venues.
Yeah.
And I just didn't see much Indian classical music there. So for me, it was a reason to start making that happen. So I did a whole series at Cornelia Street Cafe in the West Village back in the day.
Yeah.
I did a series called Carnatic Sundays over there. And it started as traditional Carnatic music, but I just brought South Indian classical musicians. And I realized that I ran out of traditional Carnatic musicians to present in like 2 months.
Wow.
Because there were just not that many of them in New York City.
Huh. Interesting.
And I was like, oh, damn. Okay. So maybe I need to branch out. So then I was like, okay, I'll do more of the crossover stuff, which is what, I'm doing now anyway, like cross genre and Hindustani music, of course, North Indian classical. So that series is kind of what got me going. And then, I was already tight with Samir, with Neil Morgai, who was a sitarist, and with my wife, Trina Basu, who's a great violinist. There was a group of us that were all playing together in each other's bands. We were all doing similar things of sort of like connecting Indian classical music with other styles. And, we're all kind of from here kind of thing. So making music like this, right? That means something to us personally. So we started to realize that there was sort of a collection of us. And we decided to start a series. And it was just a series of a band and a jam session. So modeled after like sort of the jazz jam sessions that happen in New York.
Yeah.
Is that there'd be a house band and then, but there would be an opening band. So we had like a set of somebody that we would feature and then the stage would open up for jam sessions. And it kind of started as just Indian classical musicians that showed up in the first couple of months. But because all of us that were part of it are all connected, our branches go wide, all kinds of people would come. And great musicians would roll up and the jam sessions got really, really cool, really interesting. And things just really picked up and blew up. So over the, we became a nonprofit in 2015. And then, we just started presenting a lot of other things. A lot of bands have emerged from the jam sessions. So now, we're performing quite a lot around the city, around the country. Currently, right now in March is our Ragini Festival for Women's History Month. Every March, we've been doing a festival that features women-led projects, women composers, the whole gamut. So it's a really great month. There's a lot of cool stuff happening. So you can check out brooklynragamassive.org for all that.
Wow.
I actually, I've been doing it for a long time, and it's a nonprofit, and it's a labor of love. I have 2 children, and the whole thing. So, at some point, there had to be this kind of moment where I took a step aside, which is kind of what I did this year. Earlier this year, I kind of stepped down as being the artistic director, which I was doing for a very long time, and so now I'm kind of just like on the sidelines, and I'm still playing and doing things. And I'm on the board and that. So we're still I'm involved, but my role is a little bit less on the programming side. But
But you still make music with Trina Basu, your wife.
Oh yeah, of course. Of course, yes. We have a duo project where we write together, and Trina is one of. Trina and Samir are 2 people that I think like flipped my life around. They're like kind of like when I moved to New York, it was just like, okay,
interesting.
There are people that really they get me, and we can make some real organic music together. And I met her playing in a kind of like Carnatic ensemble way back called Akshara, and we just had really great musical chemistry from the beginning, and that's before we ever dated her, I think. And then we ended up getting married, and now we have this project, and we're actually writing new music right now.
Wow.
We're probably hoping to record by this fall, and it's gonna be great. Like the new music is, go. Sorry.
Well, I want to hear. I want to go out with this piece, Migration, that you sent.
Oh yeah. So Migration, this is off the first record we put out, which is called Nakshatra. And Nakshatra means constellation in Sanskrit.
Okay.
This is a collection of music, the album it's just two violins on this album.
Yeah.
No percussion, no nothing else. And we recorded it during the pandemic. But we also realized, at that time that we've played a lot with cellists, with bass players, with drummers. And it's like our chemistry was so good, so tight, that it's like, sometimes we just felt like it would just be best with just us two. And we decided, why not try to record this just duo?
Great.
And we did.
Yeah.
And we're very, very happy with it. Yeah. And now we've been performing a lot as duo. And we find ways to, comp each other and make a full sound and use dynamics and use different ways to kind of really fill up the sound. And so this song, Migration, is actually, written about our parents' journeys, migrating from one land to another, and kind of setting up new lives and some of the challenges that come with it. So I think we're going to listen to kind of Trina's solo, and I'm kind of holding down an ostinato underneath that's kind of like, and again, the carnatic idea of like, I think about numbers first, I'm playing the thing that goes like daga 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 daga. It's like a 7 and then 3 threes. So 7 and 9, 16. So it sits in that like 4 kind of thing. But it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So I'm kind of holding that down while she soars on top. And this is kind of a part B of the song. So there's a whole A section that's got its own vibe, and then it kind of transitions.
Yeah, and it's great, and people should go find it. This is it on your own label or?
No, Spinster is a label based in North Carolina.
Oh,
and,
cool.
Run by these 3 amazing women, and they're badass, all of them. And so we were really thrilled to kind of be
beautiful. So I'll play an excerpt from this, and I just want to say thank you so much for making the time. Thanks for making the beautiful record that you did with us at Greenleaf Music, and we're so, proud to be presenting it. And then, me being a touring musician, it's been very frustrating to not have been sitting in the audience at one of your shows.
I hope soon.
We're going to have to collide. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I thank you, Dave, so much for all this. And it's been really wonderful to work with you guys, and Jonathan. And I really appreciate it. And I love music. I can't wait to, come check you out again.
All right. Awesome. Okay. Here it is. Migration. Have a good one. Thanks for listening. If you've made it this far, I thank you for listening to my conversation with Arun and all this music from Greenleaf Music. If you joined us live in the session, it was great to have you there. We had some wonderful commenting going on. If you're watching this after the fact, thank you for subscribing. Everybody else, come and join us, greenleafmusic.com. And thank you once again for Dave Douglas and Greenleaf Music.